White woman calls cop on black girl, speechless in court when she reveals her CIA badge. A crisp autumn breeze swept through Ridgewood Park as Ebony Johnson quietly sipped her coffee, unaware her life was about to turn into a national spectacle. A casual afternoon break turned chaotic when a sharp-tongued woman decided Ebony, simply minding her own business, didn't belong there. Accusations flew. Police were called. A heated confrontation erupted, revealing the ugly face of everyday racism. Little did that woman know, the calm and composed Ebony had a powerful secret that would not only turn the courtroom upside down, but bring devastating consequences for her accuser. Brace yourself. This story is about to expose the truth and serve up karmic justice. Ridgewood Park, just outside downtown Atlanta, was known for its gentle slopes, manicured lawns, and the old oak trees that provided dappled shade on warm afternoons. Families came here with their children to play on the swings, joggers took advantage of the scenic trails, and college students stretched out on blankets to study. On this particular day, Ebony Johnson, a 26-year-old graduate of Georgetown University, sat by herself at a sturdy wooden picnic table near the newly built playground. She was dressed in simple workout gear, black leggings, a gray sweatshirt, and sipped a latte from the nearby Starbucks on Peachtree Street. She'd come here to enjoy some fresh air and to distress from a hectic few weeks. The sunlight glinted off her small silver earrings as she pulled out a notebook. She liked to journal her thoughts. Writing had always been her way of staying grounded. Ebony felt a small pang of homesickness for Washington, D.C., where she'd spent her college years. She remembered the hustle and bustle of the city, the monuments lit up at night, and the vibrant neighborhoods that felt like home. But her work had brought her to Atlanta, and she was determined to make the best of it. She was so engrossed in writing that she almost didn't notice a woman standing a few feet away. The woman had short, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, wore a pastel sweater draped over her shoulders, and clutched her designer handbag. Her expression was a mix of fear and indignation. Ebony looked up and gave her a polite smile, but the woman's scowl only deepened. "Can I help you with something?" Ebony asked, unsure if the woman needed directions or help. Sometimes, Ebony recalled, strangers approached her for small talk or to ask about the local area. Perhaps this was just a confused tourist. The woman's gaze raked over Ebony. "I'm Linda Farnsworth," she said curtly. "Are you supposed to be here?" Ebony blinked. "Excuse me?" She placed her notebook down. "It's a public park, ma'am. I come here often." Linda's lips pinched. "Well, you don't look like you're from around here. I was just making sure everything is in order." The saccharine note in her voice couldn't hide the underlying hostility. Ebony felt her heart tighten in annoyance. She had seen this kind of behavior before, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt. A part of her wanted to roll her eyes and walk away, but another part told her to remain calm. She closed her notebook gently and inhaled, centering herself before responding. "Yes, I'm allowed to be here. Everyone is." Linda pursed her lips again, looking around as if searching for a park official or some sign that Ebony was breaking the rules. "I just find it suspicious, you sitting here with that big bag. We've had issues with certain people causing trouble. If you don't mind, I'd like to see some identification." Ebony suppressed a disbelieving laugh. "Identification? That's not necessary. I'm just an ordinary citizen, like you, enjoying my day." She deliberately kept her tone even, though irritation was creeping into her veins. Linda's voice sharpened. "Listen, young lady, I have every right to be concerned about suspicious activity. I know the local authorities personally. This is a very safe neighborhood, and we like to keep it that way." Ebony glanced around. A few other park visitors had started to notice the tension. She saw a mother pulling her child closer, uncertain whether she should intervene or walk away. Ebony sighed, realizing this was about to turn into one of those moments she'd read about on social media, where someone assumed a black person was up to no good, just for existing in a space. Staying cool, Ebony grabbed her latte. "Well, if you feel unsafe, you're free to leave." Linda's cheeks reddened. "How dare you speak to me like that?" A swirl of emotions coursed through Ebony: anger, exhaustion, the heaviness that comes from dealing with bias. But Ebony remained calm. She stood up slowly, adjusting her sweatshirt, and said, "I'm not causing you any trouble. Please let me enjoy my day in peace." Linda's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the authorities have to say." Her trembling hand reached inside her handbag, and she pulled out her cell phone. Right away, she began dialing. Ebony exhaled, a tremor of frustration coursing through her. It was happening again, the same old storyline. A concerned person deciding that her presence was grounds for calling the police. Ebony knew this could escalate if she didn't remain composed. Yet, she refused to shrink away. "Yes, hello?" Linda spoke into her phone, stepping a few paces away. "I'm at Ridgewood Park. There's a suspicious person here. Won't show ID, could be a threat." The worst part wasn't even the phone call itself. It was the calm conviction in Linda's voice, the sense of entitlement. Ebony ground her teeth in frustration, reminding herself that she needed to handle this with dignity. And so she waited, heart pounding but resolve solid. The police were on their way, that much was certain. The day that was supposed to be a peaceful break was now morphing into Ebony's worst nightmare. Little did Linda know that Ebony was far from an easy target. She had resources, allies, and something in her back pocket that would stun them all. As Linda stood off to the side, waiting for the police to pick up her call, Ebony's mind raced. She had spent the last 2 years working undercover for the Central Intelligence Agency, assigned to a specialized track focusing on domestic and international threats. Fresh out of Georgetown School of Foreign Service, Ebony had been recruited for her analytical brilliance and an uncanny ability to diffuse tense situations. Yet at this moment, ironically, Ebony felt powerless in the face of Linda's brazen attempt to keep the neighborhood safe. She could, of course, flash her CIA credentials right then and there. But Ebony was off duty, and publicly brandishing her badge was not only against policy, it could compromise her operational safety. Usually, only law enforcement had reason to show ID in public settings, and Ebony had strict instructions never to reveal her status unless absolutely necessary. Still, Ebony couldn't quell the burning anger inside. Was this truly the same America where she was proud to serve her country? The same place where she risked her own comfort to protect national security? The hatred and bigotry Linda displayed was nothing new, but each incident cut deeper. Ebony's father, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, had warned her that the world wasn't always fair and that wearing the CIA badge wouldn't immunize her from prejudice. He was painfully correct. Meanwhile, Linda rambled on the phone, describing Ebony with exaggerated claims. "She's acting aggressive," Linda said. "I feel threatened." Ebony could hear Linda's voice tremble with a practiced fear. Ebony rolled her eyes. She was still standing a good 10 feet away, arms at her side, making no move to approach Linda. A wave of helpless fury coursed through her, but she held herself in check. As Linda continued weaving her story to the 911 operator, Ebony noticed a tall, lanky teenager with curly hair and a skateboard under his arm approaching them. He had been sitting on a bench nearby and had witnessed the incident from the start. The boy's face was etched with concern. "Hey, is everything okay?" he asked Ebony in a low voice. Ebony looked at him, grateful for the human connection. "I'm fine. She's calling the cops because she thinks I'm suspicious." Ebony added wryly, "It's all a big misunderstanding." The teen frowned. "That's messed up." He shot Linda a glare, but Linda was too absorbed in her phone call to notice. "Do you want me to stay with you, just so there's a witness?" Ebony managed a small, appreciative smile. "Thanks. That might help." He nodded, stepping aside but staying close enough to observe. Ebony was touched by his willingness to help a stranger. Perhaps it was the younger generation's sense of justice, or maybe he had been in a similar situation before. Either way, Ebony felt a sense of solidarity. Linda finished her call and snapped her phone shut. She moved back toward Ebony, her expression triumphant. "They're on their way," she said, arms crossed over her chest. "You're in trouble now." Ebony took a steadying breath. She mentally recited a mantra. Stay calm, stay kind, stay composed. She'd learned that in her CIA conflict negotiation training. She refused to stoop to Linda's level of hostility. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I've done nothing wrong." Linda let out a laugh of disbelief. "Oh, please. The fact you're refusing to show identification is all the proof I need. People like you are always up to no good. Don't think I don't see the news. I have a right to protect my community." "People like me," Ebony repeated, raising a brow. "You know nothing about me." Linda sniffed indignantly. "I know enough. You're loitering here looking for trouble, and when I asked you politely for ID, you refused." Then, in a strangely paternalistic tone, she added, "Maybe this is a lesson you need." Ebony was about to respond when she saw swirling lights in the distance. A black and white police cruiser turned onto the park's circular driveway. Her stomach lurched. She was no stranger to working with local law enforcement in an official capacity. But this was different. She was just a regular citizen here, about to be confronted by a system that too often believed people like Linda. The teen boy's eyes widened, and Ebony could sense he was nervous too. He set his skateboard down on the ground and planted his feet firmly, clearly wanting to stand by Ebony. She gave him a reassuring nod. "Thanks for staying," she murmured. A hush fell over the immediate area as the cruiser pulled up, and two officers stepped out. One was a tall man with a graying mustache, the other a petite woman with her hair pulled into a tight bun. Ebony couldn't read their faces yet, but she hoped they wouldn't rush to judgment. Linda dashed forward, practically throwing herself in front of the officers. "Thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed. "That woman over there is refusing to leave, and I feel threatened. She looks like she might be carrying something dangerous in that bag." Ebony clutched her notebook tighter, resisting the urge to roll her eyes. She slowly lifted her hands, palms facing outward, an unfortunate protocol she'd learned as a black woman in these situations. "Officers," she said clearly, "I'm Ebony Johnson, just minding my own business here at the park. I have no weapons, no intentions of causing harm." The male officer regarded Ebony carefully. "Ma'am, can you explain what happened?" But before Ebony could speak, Linda interjected. "She refused to give me her ID when I asked. She's been acting all menacing, and my children play here." Ebony scanned the park. "Children?" Ebony repeated, glancing around. Not a single child stood behind Linda. Linda's ruse was unraveling quickly, but Ebony knew how these stories often went. The loudest voice sometimes gained the advantage. Gathering her courage, Ebony looked the officers in the eye. "I'm happy to answer your questions, but first, I'd appreciate if you could hear me out. I was here writing, minding my own business. She approached me, demanded ID, and then called you. That's all there is to it." The tension was palpable. The officers exchanged a look. Ebony prayed that reason, not prejudice, would prevail. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a twisted journey, one that would extend far beyond the boundaries of Ridgewood Park and land them all in a courtroom where Ebony's greatest secret would be revealed. The tall male officer, whose name tag read Sergeant Hill, cleared his throat and gestured for both women to remain calm. "Miss Farnsworth, we'll get to the bottom of this," he reassured Linda. Then he turned to Ebony. "Ma'am, do you have any form of identification on you?" Ebony kept her voice even. "I do, in my bag. May I reach for it?" Anxiousness flitted across Sergeant Hill's features. "Go ahead, slowly." Ebony carefully unzipped her handbag, extracting a simple state driver's license. She handed it to the female officer, whose name tag read, Officer J. Becker. Officer Becker studied the license, glanced at Ebony's face, then at the license again. She returned it with a small nod. "Everything seems fine," she murmured, stepping aside. Linda's eyes went wide with indignation. "So that's it? She can just sit here and we're done?" Sergeant Hill frowned. "Miss Farnsworth, do you have a reason to believe Miss Johnson is committing a crime?" Linda's cheeks flushed with anger. "She refused to show me ID. Doesn't that count for anything? She was suspicious, sitting alone, and I felt threatened. She clenched her handbag strap tighter. The sergeant's voice took on a note of weary patience. It's not a crime to sit in a public park, and it's certainly not a requirement to show private identification to a private citizen. Officer Becker raised an eyebrow at Linda. Unless you have evidence of wrongdoing, we don't have grounds to remove her. Linda sputtered. I can't believe this, so you're not going to do your jobs? Miss Farnsworth, Sergeant Hill said more sternly. We responded because you reported suspicious activity. We've checked it out. Miss Johnson has cooperated. We see no evidence of any unlawful behavior. If you have no further complaint, we'll be on our way. For a moment, Linda seemed at a loss for words. A small crowd had gathered at a distance, curious about the commotion. The teen who stood with Ebony discreetly filmed the exchange on his phone, likely for his own safety, or so Ebony would have a record of what was going on. Ebony felt grateful. She knew how quickly narratives could flip if there wasn't documentation. That's it? Linda exclaimed. She gets to stay? Sergeant Hill didn't hide his exasperation. This is a public space, Miss Farnsworth. You're both allowed to be here. If you're uncomfortable, you may leave. Linda looked to Ebony, a mixture of frustration and disbelief in her eyes. Then she glared at the officers. Fine, but this isn't over. She spun on her heel and marched away, practically trembling with fury. Ebony could feel her whole body shaking. She exhaled deeply, trying to release the tension knotted in her shoulders. Thank you, officers, she said quietly. I appreciate you hearing me out. Sergeant Hill nodded. No problem. Sorry for the inconvenience. You take care now. The officers headed back to their cruiser, the tension dissipating but leaving behind an uncomfortable residue. Ebony gathered her things, realizing the tranquil mood she'd enjoyed was shattered. The teen approached her again, phone in hand. I got most of that on video, he said. If you need it, I can send it to you. She smiled gratefully. Thank you, She realized she didn't even know his name. Marcus, he supplied. I'm Marcus. Thank you, Marcus. She slipped him her number. Let's keep in touch, just in case. After Marcus skated away, Ebony took a moment to steady herself. She looked around, noticing how some onlookers quickly averted their gazes, as though embarrassed to have witnessed the confrontation. A group of older ladies on a nearby bench whispered among themselves. Ebony felt the urge to leave, but pride anchored her feet. Linda Farnsworth would not chase her away from a public park, and Ebony was determined not to let the moment define her day. Still, Ebony couldn't shake the haunting feeling that Linda would try something else. The bitterness in Linda's voice suggested she wasn't about to let the matter rest. As Ebony gathered her courage and decided to stay a bit longer, she resolved that if Linda did anything else, Ebony would rely on her training, her resilience, and her legal rights. She couldn't reveal she was CIA, but she wouldn't be silenced either. She returned to the picnic table, ignoring the stares. Opening her notebook, Ebony tried to refocus. But her thoughts churned, leaping back to her father's words about how being a black woman in America carried certain burdens that wouldn't vanish just because she earned a prestigious degree, or served her country in an esteemed intelligence agency. The sting of those words felt more real than ever. Eventually, Ebony decided to stand and walk the park perimeter, hoping fresh air and movement would help clear her head. The shuffle of leaves under her sneakers was comforting, reminding her of simpler times at home. As she circled back toward the park entrance, she caught a fleeting glimpse of Linda Farnsworth's pale blue sedan pulling out of the parking lot, tires squealing. Ebony felt a wave of relief that Linda was gone, for now. But Ebony couldn't know that Linda's vendetta was just beginning, that soon enough, Ebony would find her name at the center of an unwarranted controversy, and that it would take a very public and very dramatic showdown inside an Atlanta courthouse for the truth to come out. Her double life, her CIA credentials, the fundamental reason Ebony had to keep her identity hidden. Soon, it would all come to light in the most astonishing way. The next few days felt like a tense waiting game for Ebony. She tried to resume normalcy, working out at her favorite gym on Piedmont Road, grabbing coffee from that same Starbucks near the park, and tending to her actual duties, clandestine though they were. Officially, Ebony worked for a private consulting firm as a data analyst. Unofficially, she was deep in the intelligence community, focusing on domestic extremist groups that threaten national security. The job required her to maintain a low profile to blend in, but the incident in the park had rattled her carefully balanced existence. Back in her small but cozy apartment in Midtown Atlanta, Ebony found solace in cooking, something that always reminded her of home. She diced onions and peppers for a stir-fry, humming quietly to the background music emanating from her phone. Occasionally she glanced at the living room window, half expecting Linda Farnsworth to appear outside with some new accusation. Images of Linda's contemptuous face replayed in Ebony's mind. Had Linda truly let the matter go? Ebony doubted it. The way Linda had marched off, incensed and craving some form of retribution, suggested this was only the beginning. Ebony considered telling her CIA handler about the incident. But what exactly would she say? A random woman in the park racially profiled me. I'm worried she might cause trouble. Her superiors were strict about personal entanglements, but Ebony also knew they didn't want their agents' covers compromised. She decided to wait, to see if Linda would truly escalate the issue. As she poured soy sauce into the pan, Ebony's thoughts drifted to her upbringing. She was born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Baltimore. Her father, Sergeant Gerald Johnson, was a Marine who believed fervently in discipline and patriotism. He'd taught Ebony that love for one's country sometimes meant fighting for respect within it. Her mother, a social worker, had instilled empathy and perseverance in Ebony from a young age. Ebony excelled in school, eventually earning a scholarship to attend Georgetown University, where she studied international relations. During her junior year, she caught the eye of a CIA recruiter who was impressed by her language skills. She was fluent in French and Spanish, and her ability to handle high-pressure debates. After graduation, Ebony went through rigorous training at the farm in Virginia, learning the tradecraft of an intelligence officer, surveillance techniques, defensive driving, firearms basics, encryption, negotiation. She was proud of her role, proud to be part of something bigger than herself, even if it meant secrecy and personal sacrifice. But she never imagined her biggest hurdle out in the real world wouldn't be espionage, but everyday racism. Tasting her stir-fry, Ebony decided it needed more ginger. A quick rummage through her spice rack came up empty. She let out a sigh. Another trip to the grocery store then. She grabbed her purse and slid her phone into her back pocket. Stepping outside into the mild Atlanta evening, she scanned the street. Cars rolled by under streetlights, and neighbors greeted each other while walking their dogs. Ebony headed to the corner store, minding her own business. But her senses were on alert. She couldn't help it. Her training had made her hyper-aware of potential threats. She noticed a silver sedan parked across the street, engine idling. Her skin prickled. Was that Linda's car? She wasn't certain. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside. Willing herself not to be paranoid, Ebony walked briskly. The sedan didn't follow. After a few more steps, she allowed herself to relax. Perhaps she was overreacting. Even CIA officers had the right to be a bit jumpy after a confrontation like that. At the corner store, Ebony navigated the aisles until she found the spices. She was comparing 2 brands of ginger powder when her phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, she saw an unknown number. A flicker of unease went through her, but she answered anyway. "Hello?" "Hello, Ebony. This is Marcus from the park," said a hesitant voice on the other end. Relief washed over her. "Hey, Marcus, what's up?" Marcus cleared his throat. I just wanted to let you know, I saw that woman again. She was asking around at the skate park near Ridgewood, showing your picture and everything. She was saying she was looking for information about you." Ebony's stomach dropped. "What? She has my picture?" "Well, a screenshot from the video. I guess she froze it on your face. She's telling people you're dangerous and that you might be plotting something." Ebony couldn't believe what she was hearing. Insane. Thank you for letting me know. Sure, Marcus said. I wanted to warn you. It's not cool what she's doing. Ebony swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. I appreciate it. Keep me posted if she approaches you again, okay? Yeah, will do. She hung up, her heart hammering in her chest. Linda was on some sort of witch hunt. This was more than paranoia. Linda was actively trying to stir up trouble, to brand Ebony as a public menace. Ebony blinked hard, trying to contain the surge of anger. She recalled that Linda had threatened, "This isn't over." Well, it seemed Linda meant every word. Gripping the ginger jar in her hand, Ebony left the store, feeling the weight of the potential storm building around her. Linda was scouring Ebony's community, painting Ebony as a dangerous figure. Yet Ebony had to keep her CIA identity hidden. She couldn't simply wave her credentials around to end Linda's crusade. That was not how the agency operated. But Ebony also refused to be a victim. If Linda wanted a fight, Ebony would defend herself, with the truth. And if it came down to a legal confrontation, Ebony would be prepared. She wasn't just a random bystander. She was Ebony Johnson, and she had far more resources at her disposal than Linda could ever imagine. Another week passed. The tension between Ebony and Linda turned into an almost mythical story around the neighborhood. Marcus reported that Linda kept circulating Ebony's image, though many people seemed skeptical of Linda's claims. Ebony tried to keep her head down, focusing on her official responsibilities at the CIA's Atlanta field office. However, the quiet did not last. One morning, Ebony woke early to check her email. Among the usual batch of updates and intelligence briefs was a perplexing message from a local law firm. The subject line read, "Notice of civil complaint, Farnsworth versus Johnson." Ebony's stomach tightened as she opened it. The contents made her eyes widen in disbelief. Linda Farnsworth was suing Ebony for emotional distress, defamation, and threatening behavior. The official letter alleged that Ebony had deliberately and maliciously caused Miss Farnsworth to fear for her safety, and that Ebony had spread falsehoods about Miss Farnsworth's character, resulting in reputational harm. Ebony felt heat rise in her cheeks. This was beyond outrageous. Linda was the one who had harassed Ebony. How had the situation flipped so completely? Ebony read further, her indignation growing. The letter demanded a response within 21 days or a default judgment could be entered against her. She realized Linda was trying to strong-arm her into a court battle, presumably hoping Ebony would settle out of fear. In that moment, Ebony felt a surge of defiance. She might have to keep her professional identity under wraps, but she wasn't about to let Linda drag her name through the mud. She dialed the number of a lawyer contact recommended by a friend. Her heart pounded, but Ebony was prepared to fight. After a few rings, a calm voice answered, "Law Office of Penelope Garcia. How may I help you?" Ebony explained the situation briefly, requesting a consultation. Within an hour, Ebony was in a video conference with Penelope Garcia herself, a poised woman with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for championing civil rights cases. Penelope listened carefully to Ebony's side of the story, occasionally jotting notes. When Ebony finished, Penelope sighed. "This woman, Linda Farnsworth, is essentially accusing you of wrongdoing in a public setting and claiming you defamed her afterward, though from what you've told me it's quite the opposite. Do you have any proof of your interactions? Any eyewitnesses?" Relief washed over Ebony as she recalled Marcus's video. "Yes, I have a recording from a witness. It clearly shows Linda being the aggressor, not me." Penelope nodded. "That's good. We'll need that. We can counterclaim for harassment or false allegations. Let me do some digging. Miss Farnsworth's lawyer will have to produce evidence of her claims, which from the sound of it might be non-existent." They discussed Ebony's potential legal strategies, the steps involved, and how Ebony wanted to proceed. Ebony was adamant about clearing her name. "I don't want to settle or pay her a dime," Ebony insisted. "I did nothing wrong." Penelope offered a reassuring smile. "I'll handle it, but be prepared. Civil cases can become nasty and public. Farnsworth might try to use publicity against you. Ebony considered that. A public trial meant her personal life could become an open book, something that was directly at odds with her CIA position. She would have to tread carefully, perhaps even notify her chain of command. But Ebony also recognized that letting Linda run roughshod over her was not an option. She had to stand up. After concluding the call, Ebony took a moment to gather her thoughts. She composed a brief email to her CIA supervisor, coded in a way that indicated she needed to discuss a sensitive personal legal matter. Moments later, her phone vibrated with a text from Marcus, telling her Linda had filed the lawsuit and was bragging about how Ebony would be taken down. Ebony refused to be intimidated. If Linda wanted to turn this into a spectacle, Ebony would meet her in court. And if Ebony had no choice but to reveal a portion of her true identity, so be it. Linda Farnsworth had cast the first stone, and Ebony was not the type to crumble under pressure. Meanwhile, Linda Farnsworth was basking in her self-proclaimed victory. She hosted a small gathering at her lavish home, located in a gated community on the outskirts of Atlanta. The living room was a testament to opulence, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and carefully curated artwork that hinted at her desire to appear cultured. A handful of Linda's like-minded acquaintances sipped wine and murmured encouragement. Linda relished their attention, spinning the narrative of how she had been threatened by Ebony, painting herself as a victim of an unprovoked attack. She conveniently omitted the fact that Ebony had done nothing except refuse to comply with Linda's unreasonable demand for ID. As the evening wore on, Linda's retelling became more dramatic. "She stood there glaring at me with such hostility," Linda said, feigning a quiver in her voice. "I really thought she was going to attack me, and the police, well, they just didn't do their jobs." One of her friends, Marjorie, leaned in. "Those officers should have taken her away. But don't worry, Linda. Now that you've filed the lawsuit, she'll have to pay for her actions." Linda nodded, swirling the wine in her glass. "Exactly. I'm not letting this drop until she admits fault. People like her think they can just waltz in, disregard our rules, and bully law-abiding citizens. Well, not on my watch." Deep down, Linda knew her story was less than truthful, but she justified it to herself by clinging to the notion that Ebony had somehow disrespected her. Linda had always been sensitive to any perceived slight, especially from individuals she deemed lesser. Over the years, Linda's sense of entitlement had only grown, fueled by a social circle that rarely challenged her prejudices. Since the park incident, Linda had thrown herself into damage control, determined to spin the narrative that she was the victim. She'd visited her pastor, bemoaning how she felt unsafe. She spoke to neighbors, telling them Ebony was a criminal plotting something sinister. In Linda's mind, it was a crusade to protect the community, though she had no real evidence to support such claims. Between sips of wine, Linda told her guests about the upcoming court date. "I'm demanding damages," she declared, "for my emotional suffering. She robbed me of my sense of security, and I want the court to see the truth." Marjorie clucked sympathetically, but the others seemed slightly uneasy. One man in the corner, a friend's husband who'd been roped into attending, asked quietly, "Are you sure you have a strong case? She didn't actually break any law that day, right?" Linda stiffened, her eyes flashing. "Are you taking her side?" No, of course not." He backpedaled, just curious. But Linda's expression remained icy. "I know what I saw, and the law is on my side." She ended the conversation with a dismissive wave, refocusing on the people who fed her anger rather than questioned it. Yet despite Linda's bravado, a kernel of fear gnawed at her. The police had not backed her claims. People in the neighborhood seemed skeptical. Could Ebony Johnson have more power or connections than Linda realized? Linda tried to brush away such doubts. In her worldview, Ebony was an outsider, a nobody. Linda had money, a social circle, and a lawyer skilled in twisting facts to her advantage. That should be enough to crush Ebony in court, right? Linda pushed the nagging insecurity aside. She clinked glasses with her guests, forcing a bright smile. "To justice. she toasted. But behind her show of confidence lay a nervous undercurrent, because Linda had no idea Ebony Johnson held a secret that could turn everything upside down. The night wore on, Linda's ego fueled by wine and praise. She believed wholeheartedly that Ebony would fold under legal pressure, maybe even move away. In Linda's mind, Ebony was an easy target, but Linda's contempt would soon unravel when confronted with the cold, hard truth of who Ebony really was, and what Ebony had the power to do. The day of the first court hearing arrived under a gray sky, as if the weather itself sensed the tension. The courthouse, located in downtown Atlanta near the iconic CNN Center, buzzed with activity. Lawyers in tailored suits shuffled by, carrying briefcases and juggling phone calls. Plaintiffs and defendants waited anxiously on wooden benches. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and bureaucracy. Ebony sat in a hallway outside the assigned courtroom, a tightness in her chest. She had never been on this side of the legal system before. Usually her work involved quietly gathering information about genuine national threats, not defending herself in a civil suit brought by a vindictive neighbor. Penelope Garcia, her attorney, sat beside her, scanning through case files. Occasionally she'd glance reassuringly at Ebony. Linda Farnsworth arrived moments later, escorted by two individuals, her lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Clay Harrison, and Marjorie. Linda wore a smug expression, her chin lifted as if she were about to star in a grand performance. She spared Ebony a single glance that dripped with contempt before following Clay into the courtroom. Penelope gave Ebony's arm a gentle squeeze. "Don't worry. Let's see how this initial hearing goes. We'll present our evidence, and if everything goes right, we might be able to get this case dismissed or at least set a favorable tone." Ebony exhaled, reminded of the mantra from her training. Stay calm, stay kind, stay composed. She needed it now more than ever. If push came to shove, Ebony was prepared to reveal her CIA affiliation, but only if it was absolutely necessary. She had alerted her agency contact, who advised Ebony to keep a low profile unless Linda's accusations threatened Ebony's security clearance or operational secrecy. Ebony prayed it wouldn't come to that. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt both solemn and electric. The judge, a stately woman named Judge Amelia Brooks, took her seat at the bench. Everyone rose momentarily, then settled back down. Linda's side sat to the right, Ebony's side to the left. A few bystanders filled the rows, likely drawn by the spectacle Linda had created. Judge Brooks surveyed the docket. Case number 74321, Farnsworth versus Johnson. She lifted her gaze. "Mr. Harrison, Miss Garcia, please approach." Clay Harrison stood first, addressing the court with the flair of a seasoned litigator. He described Linda's supposed distress, painting Ebony as a menacing figure who had threatened Miss Farnsworth's personal safety. Ebony had to clench her jaw to remain silent. Clay then claimed that Ebony defamed Linda by telling neighbors Linda was a racist. Ebony's stomach churned. Linda had twisted Ebony's words. Ebony had never publicly called Linda a racist, though Linda's actions spoke volumes for themselves. Penelope stepped up next, her posture poised and voice steady. "Your Honor, we have video evidence showing my client, Miss Johnson, acting calmly and courteously. This video clearly depicts Miss Farnsworth as the aggressor, harassing Miss Johnson and calling the police without cause. The allegations of defamation and threatening behavior are baseless." Judge Brooks leaned forward. "Video evidence, you say?" Penelope nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We can submit it now." Clay Harrison quickly objected. "Your Honor, that video is incomplete. It only shows a snippet of events, and it's from the perspective of a bystander who may be biased." Judge Brooks asked Penelope, "Is there audio as well?" Penelope answered, "Yes. It includes audio of Miss Farnsworth accusing Miss Johnson of criminal intent without any evidence. We request the court to review it in its entirety." Judge Brooks weighed the arguments. "I'll allow the video to be submitted for review. We'll determine its admissibility and relevance before the trial proceeds further." Linda sat ramrod straight, glaring at Ebony. Ebony's pulse quickened as the video was passed to the judge's clerk. In the footage, Linda's voice rang out clearly as she demanded Ebony's ID, called the police, and made claims about feeling threatened. Ebony hoped this was enough to dismantle Linda's accusations. After a brief recess while the judge and counsel conferred, the judge returned with a measured expression. Based on the preliminary review, the video does show Miss Farnsworth initiating contact and calling the police. There's no immediate evidence of Miss Johnson threatening Miss Farnsworth. However, since Miss Farnsworth's claim includes alleged defamation that occurred after the incident, we'll need more testimony. This case will proceed to trial. Linda's lawyer cast a triumphant smirk, while Ebony felt a knot form in her stomach. Despite the video, the judge was allowing the suit to continue, likely because Linda alleged Ebony had slandered her. Ebony realized that Linda had cunningly framed the entire scenario to drag Ebony through a prolonged legal battle. Dismissal, it seemed, wouldn't come easily. Judge Brooks set a date for the formal trial, instructing both parties to prepare witnesses and evidence. As Ebony left the courtroom, Linda brushed past her, leaning in just enough to hiss under her breath, "Enjoy your last days of freedom." For a split second, Ebony's composure wavered. She wanted to fire back that Linda had no idea who she was dealing with. But Ebony tamped down her anger. She would let the truth emerge in court. She would let Linda's own words and actions be her downfall. Penelope walked beside Ebony, offering a confident smile. "Don't worry, we've got the facts on our side. The more Linda pushes, the more she'll expose her lies." Ebony nodded. But a flicker of dread remained. Linda's determination seemed fueled by something beyond logic, a personal vendetta that was dangerously close to unraveling Ebony's life. What Linda couldn't possibly guess was that Ebony had an ace up her sleeve, one that might leave Linda speechless when the time came to reveal it. The trial date arrived in a whirlwind. Word had spread around the community about the park incident, and people were eager to see how it would unfold. A handful of reporters showed up, presumably tipped off by Linda or her associates. Cameras flashed as Ebony and Penelope entered the courthouse. Ebony could practically feel Linda's smug grin from across the building. Inside the courtroom, Ebony took a seat next to Penelope. Linda and her lawyer occupied the plaintiff's table. Linda wore a crisp white blouse and had styled her hair in a severe bun, perhaps hoping to look dignified. Ebony's heart beat rapidly, but she forced herself to remain calm. Judge Brooks entered, and after the formalities, Clay Harrison began his opening statement. He painted Linda as a concerned citizen who felt her life was endangered by Ebony's refusal to comply with reasonable requests. He then pivoted to the defamation angle, claiming Ebony had labeled Linda a racist to numerous people, damaging Linda's immaculate reputation. Ebony fought the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she reminded herself to trust the process, trust Penelope. Penelope's opening statement was factual and precise. She emphasized Ebony's right to be in a public park without harassment. She disputed the defamation claim, stating no evidence existed that Ebony publicly slandered Linda. Instead, Ebony merely defended herself from Linda's false accusations. Penelope concluded with a plea for justice, urging the court not to allow a frivolous lawsuit to stand in for genuine accountability. Next came witness testimonies. Linda called Marjorie and a few of her friends to the stand. They repeated Linda's scripted narrative, claiming Linda had been deeply disturbed by Ebony's behavior. On cross-examination, Penelope deftly picked apart their stories, pointing out inconsistencies. Did they actually see Ebony make any threats? Had Ebony used words that could be construed as defamatory? The witnesses stumbled under Penelope's calm but incisive questioning. It was clear they were testifying out of loyalty to Linda rather than first-hand knowledge. Then it was Ebony's turn. Penelope called her to the stand, guiding her through a series of questions about what actually happened in the park. Ebony described the incident in detail, staying composed despite Linda's icy glare. "Miss Johnson," Penelope asked, "did you ever call Miss Farnsworth a racist or use any disparaging language about her to others?" Ebony shook her head firmly. "No. After the incident, some people approached me asking what happened. I told them Miss Farnsworth demanded my ID and called the police. I never branded her with any label." Clay Harrison stood for cross-examination. Miss Johnson, is it true that you have a background in, let's call it specialized training? Ebony's pulse quickened. Clay was prying into her personal history. I attended Georgetown University, she said neutrally. I studied international relations. Clay pounced. Yes, but is that all? Aren't you also known to law enforcement in some capacity? Penelope objected, but Clay pressed on. The plaintiff has a right to know if Miss Johnson has skills or affiliations that might have made her a threat in the park. The judge overruled Penelope's initial objection, giving Ebony limited latitude to respond. Ebony took a deep breath. She had to be careful here. I do consulting work, Ebony offered. Some of my projects intersect with law enforcement training, but that doesn't mean I pose a threat to Miss Farnsworth or anyone else. Clay's eyes narrowed. Is that so? Miss Farnsworth claims that your demeanor was intimidating, perhaps because you're used to dealing with threats in a professional context. Could it be you used that training to scare her? Ebony clenched her jaw. No, I remained calm, as the video evidence shows. The second day of trial dawned bright and unrelenting. Camera crews had multiplied overnight, and a small throng of curious onlookers gathered outside the courthouse, hoping for a glimpse of the high-drama confrontation. Ebony's stomach churned with anxiety. Though she had prepared herself for this moment, there was no denying the gravity of what she was about to do. Inside the courtroom, Linda exuded smug confidence, whispering with Clay Harrison at the plaintiff's table. On Ebony's side, Penelope exuded her usual calm, but had a determined glint in her eye. Once proceedings began, Clay wasted no time calling Ebony back to the stand for further cross-examination. Miss Johnson, Clay said, feigning politeness. Yesterday we touched on your background. I'd like to explore that further. Are you now, or have you ever been, affiliated with a government agency that provides you specialized training in combat or interrogation techniques? Ebony's pulse hammered in her ears. She glanced at Penelope, who gave her a subtle nod. The judge, too, watched with interest, perhaps sensing a significant revelation. Drawing in a breath, Ebony answered, Yes, I am a federal employee. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even Linda leaned forward, her eyes widening. Ebony met Clay's gaze. I'm employed by the Central Intelligence Agency. I hold the position of an intelligence officer. Gasps rippled through the spectators. A few reporters scrambled to take notes or turn on recording devices. Linda looked stunned, her mouth opened slightly, eyes darting nervously at Clay. Clay forced a smile. The CIA, you say? That's quite the claim. Do you have any proof? Ebony reached into the inside pocket of her blazer. She carefully produced a small black leather case. Flipping it open, she presented her CIA badge and credentials. She held them out for the judge to see, then offered them to Clay, who hesitated before taking a cursory glance. Judge Brooks signaled for them to be entered into the record under seal, given their sensitive nature. When Ebony turned back to Linda, Linda's face was pale, and her expression was that of a woman whose carefully crafted narrative had just imploded. Clay struggled to maintain composure. Well, that's unexpected, he managed. So you admit you have specialized training that could intimidate someone like my client? Ebony answered calmly, My training is for national security purposes. It doesn't include harassing citizens in public parks. Quite the opposite. I've been trained to de-escalate situations, which is exactly what I attempted to do when Miss Farnsworth confronted me. Penelope stood to interject. Your Honor, Miss Johnson has submitted her credentials. Her being a CIA officer in no way supports the plaintiff's claim that she is a threat. In fact, it underscores Miss Johnson's commitment to upholding the law and ensuring public safety. Judge Brooks nodded thoughtfully. Indeed. Mr. Harrison, if your argument rests on Miss Johnson's background suggesting she'd be aggressive, this revelation seems to counter that. Federal intelligence officers are bound by strict conduct guidelines. Let's proceed carefully. Linda, fidgeting in her seat, whispered frantically to Clay. Despite their hushed tones, Ebony could guess Linda was in panic mode, All the talk of Ebony being some shady troublemaker was laughable now that Ebony's official status had come to light. Linda's face flushed red, a stark contrast to her white blouse. Gone was her earlier confidence. She looked instead like a cornered animal. The day's testimonies continued, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Penelope took the opportunity to show Ebony's commendations, redacted for sensitive information, that highlighted Ebony's service in analyzing threats to national security. Suddenly, Ebony was painted not as a menacing figure, but as a dedicated public servant. When it was Linda's turn to testify, she stammered through her version of events. Clay's attempts to redirect the narrative faltered each time Penelope brought up Ebony's impeccable record. Linda grew flustered, contradicting herself about Ebony's alleged threats. The video footage, combined with Ebony's demonstration of calm composure and her newly revealed professional background, blew massive holes in Linda's lawsuit. By the afternoon recess, the reporters outside were buzzing with the bombshell. A CIA officer had been racially profiled and then sued by the person who harassed her. What a sensational story. Linda tried to avoid the cameras as she hurried to a private room with Clay. Ebony, meanwhile, took a moment to breathe in the hallway, letting the tension slowly ebb away. Penelope joined her. "You did great," Penelope said softly. "I think that effectively neutralized their argument. The jury can see what's really going on. Linda's claims are unraveling." Ebony nodded, relief mixing with lingering dread. She had revealed her CIA status, which opened a whole new can of worms. She'd likely have to file extensive paperwork and face internal reviews, but it was better than allowing Linda's false narrative to stand. Stepping back into the courtroom after recess, Ebony felt a renewed sense of resolve. Linda might have planned to humiliate Ebony, but the tables had turned in the most dramatic way possible, and Ebony hoped that the final verdict would deliver the justice that had been long overdue. After the revelation of Ebony's CIA credentials, the trial proceeded quickly. Linda's accusations of defamation and threatening behavior had no legs to stand on once Ebony's calm actions and impeccable record were laid bare. Even the local police incident report confirmed Ebony had been cooperative. With no evidence, she threatened Linda. The jury's expression made it clear they saw Linda's lawsuit for what it was, a malicious attempt to intimidate and profit from her baseless claims. Linda squirmed under the scrutiny. Each time Clay tried to pivot to a different angle, claiming Ebony spread rumors in the neighborhood, Penelope systematically dismantled it, calling forward neighbors who testified Ebony had never spoken ill of Linda, only described what had happened. Marcus, the teen who recorded the initial incident, took the stand and recounted Linda's aggressive behavior. He even mentioned how Linda had shown his friends Ebony's picture, warning them of Ebony's supposed danger. This testimony only hammered home that Linda, not Ebony, was the defamer. By the end, Linda looked worn, her veneer of superiority cracked. When it was time for closing arguments, Clay's speech rang hollow. The jury's attention visibly shifted to Penelope, who gave a succinct summary. Ebony Johnson was an upstanding citizen and federal officer, maliciously targeted by Linda Farnsworth's prejudice and arrogance. This lawsuit was nothing but an attempt to salvage Linda's pride and extract a financial windfall. Judge Brooks gave the jury their instructions, and they retreated to deliberate. Ebony sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, while Linda fidgeted at the plaintiff's table. Only an hour passed before the jury returned, an unusually brief deliberation that often signaled a decisive verdict. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Brooks asked. The foreman of the jury, an older woman with kind eyes, stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the claims of defamation, emotional distress, and threatening behavior lodged by Miss Farnsworth against Miss Johnson, we find in favor of the defendant, Ms. Johnson. We also find Miss Farnsworth's case to be frivolous and malicious, and we recommend that Miss Johnson's legal fees be covered by the plaintiff. Furthermore, we request the court consider sanctions due to the plaintiff's apparent misuse of the legal system." Linda's face fell as though the ground had opened under her feet. Clay's lips pressed into a tight line, and he placed a hand on Linda's shoulder as if to steady her. Gasps and murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. Ebony bowed her head, an overwhelming sense of relief washing over her. Judge Brooks thanked the jury, then added her own comments. She admonished Linda for abusing the court's time and resources and expressed sympathy for Ebony, who had been forced to reveal her sensitive employment status just to defend herself. It was a stern rebuke that left Linda trembling with humiliation. When the judge banged her gavel, Ebony felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She had won, decisively. The courtroom erupted in subdued applause, though the bailiffs quickly quieted it. Linda fled the courtroom, ignoring reporters who clamored for a statement. Clay followed, looking equally chastised. As Ebony left the stand, she was met by Marcus, who gave her a thumbs up, and a few supporters who applauded her victory. Penelope offered a warm hug. "Justice served," she whispered. Ebony stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the cameras flashing. She gave a brief statement, her voice steady. "I'm grateful for the court's decision and thank everyone who stood by me. I hope this outcome reminds us we all have the right to live and enjoy public spaces without fear of being harassed or profiled." Karma had indeed struck Linda Farnsworth hard. Not only did she lose the lawsuit and face possible sanctions, but her reputation in the community suffered a severe blow. Word spread quickly that she had harassed a black woman in a public park, and then tried to profit from the ensuing conflict. Many of Linda's friends and neighbors distanced themselves from her, unwilling to be associated with someone who had orchestrated such a hateful and baseless campaign. Back at her apartment, Ebony reflected on the entire ordeal. Yes, she had to reveal more about her CIA status than she ever wanted, but in doing so, she exposed Linda's bigotry and manipulative tactics. Ebony's father once told her that sometimes the biggest battles happen in your own backyard, not on foreign soil. Now she understood. Fighting prejudice at home was as vital as defending national interests abroad. Though the scars of the experience remained, Ebony emerged with her dignity intact and her spirit unbroken. Linda Farnsworth, meanwhile, faced a harsh lesson in accountability. And in that moral reckoning, Ebony found a quiet triumph that transcended any courtroom verdict. Every so often, the world needs a reminder that justice can, and does, prevail. In this extraordinary case, a baseless lawsuit meant to tear down an innocent black woman ended up revealing her true power. By stepping into that courtroom, Ebony Johnson demonstrated not only her resilience, but also the unwavering commitment she held to defending the principles of fairness, dignity, and respect, values she championed both as a citizen and as a CIA officer. Linda Farnsworth, driven by prejudice and a thirst for vengeance, found that her hateful intentions would only serve to undo her. Thank you so much for watching this dramatic story unfold. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice, redemption, and inspiring triumphs. Your support helps us continue bringing you powerful tales that shine a light on truth and integrity. Stay tuned for our next riveting story.